All right, guys, welcome back. My name is Adam. I'm a functional nutritionist, personal trainer, holistic health coach, and I'm just looking to try to help people get their health in order. I work a lot with people who have very busy lives, people in the nonprofit world, and mostly I just want to help people focus on finding their health if they've lost it, or finding a way to maximize the health they do have. So if you're watching this on YouTube, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, leave comments. It helps us with the algorithm. Also, if you're watching this on or listening to it on your favorite podcast outlet, then please like and share, as it helps us get our content in front of more people and hopefully help more people change their lives for the better. Today we're going to talk about intermittent fasting and working out specifically while intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is not a new concept. It kind of took off in the social media sphere, Reddit world, and exercise world just a few years back. It's not a revolutionary concept. It's not some ancient wisdom that we forgot about from years back. I've read books talking about how it's ancient wisdom and all this other stuff. There is some healing possibilities when it comes to fasting in general, but intermittent fasting, we need to specify the words we're using here. Intermittent means I do it kind of regularly, or on some type of schedule, in a sense. It's not fasting. Fasting is when you go without food or just do water for an extended amount of time, usually 24 hours or more. And there are some benefits to that, but specifically for our purposes, we're going to talk about exercising and intermittent fasting. There is a guy named Martin Berkhan. I believe he's from Scandinavia. I think he's from Sweden. Hilarious guy, brilliant. He started to popularize the 16-8 intermittent fasting approach many years back. I started reading him many years back. And if you don't know what 16-8 means, that just refers to the hours that you're not eating compared to the hours you are eating. So some people, you will do 16-8, meaning you would fast, basically take in little to no calories for 16 hours. That includes your sleep. And you would eat. You would have a feeding window of 8 hours. That would be where you would focus on getting the majority of your calories in. And the idea was to compress this eating window so that you could take advantage of a few things. One, you take advantage of the fact that while you're fasting, you are basically running on ketones. For the most part, you are using stored body fat as a source of fuel, which the body is very well adapted to this process. The body is a survival mechanism. It is what it is. It is a machine for survival. Machine is a bad term because we're not necessarily machines, but it is our organism as an organism. Sorry, I'm getting tied up here. As an organism, one of the strongest underlying codes in our DNA is survival. So we have two forms of fuel we can run off of. We can run off glucose, which is very quick, burns really fast, which some doctors will say is our preferred state, which I don't necessarily think we have a preferred state. But then we can also run off of ketones, which are oxidized body fat or triglycerides, cholesterol, whichever one you want to say. So we can run off of both of these. And what's particularly awesome about the human body is that it can interchange these depending on the demand, or depending on the fuel source or availability. So it's very interesting. So what people are trying to do with intermittent fasting is they're trying to prioritize burning body fat over, let's say, the fuel that you just ate. Okay? So if you just eat, you are burning whatever you just ate, right? It's in your bloodstream. So many people started using this, especially Martin. A big thing that he was focusing on was going without food so you can kind of stay in a deficit. That's the main power of this style of eating is it creates a deficit pretty easily. And then when you are eating, you are maximizing your protein intake, macronutrient intake, lots of fiber, things that will keep you full for a long period of time. And then by maximizing your protein intake and taking in a pretty large amount of calories, depending on the person, you are maximizing the thermic effect of food as well. All you have to do is read his writings. A big tool that he uses is to try to burn as many calories as possible when you are eating. And he's not doing it through cardio, he's doing it through manipulating macronutrients, because protein has a very high energy. It's very high energy to break down nitrogen and amino acids. So he's saying, hey, let's leverage that to burn more fat. Okay, that makes sense. And it has worked, and Martin is brilliant. He has the science to back it up. But what has happened in the culture is we have turned this intermittent fasting into a bit of a cult. We've turned it into a bit of a, for lack of a better term, like a superpower, or this hidden gem of biology that we all forgot about, and we try to leverage it in a way that does not necessarily help us. If we look at intermittent fasting or fasting in general, from a biological point of view, there will be times where an animal or an organism has to go without food. Therefore, surviving without food is paramount. There's no way to pass on your genetics if you die as soon as there is no food. So we have this mechanism to survive without food. Now, is that a preferred state? Is that a better state? I wouldn't say that any of those states is preferred over the other. I would imagine the body tends to thrive best when it has a consistent source of calories and fuel that it can depend on, therefore begin to relax and procreate and create, other little organisms running around, right? Babies, other plants, other tigers, whatever the organism is. The issue is we've turned this thing into like a secret weapon, which is pretty common in the Western world. We're very reductionist. We're looking for the one thing that I have to do to cheat death, to cheat, having to work harder. So we're always looking for the one thing. But the problem is intermittent fasting is just a tool like any other. It's when you go without food. Some people just call it skipping breakfast. So how on earth did skipping breakfast turn into a superpower? It's not. And one thing it can do, one thing it is useful for, is creating convenience and creating a calorie deficit without having to think about it. Now, we know from, if you've watched any of my other videos or any of my other content, you have to be in a calorie deficit in order to lose weight. So if your goal in trying intermittent fasting is to lose weight, then you have to create a deficit somehow. You have to take in less food somehow. I know there's plenty of people out there, especially in the carnivore community, who are like, calories don't matter. And I have yet to see anybody refute physics totally. So kind of put them in their own camp of deniers in a sense, but I don't necessarily disagree completely with the carnivore diet. I would not give anybody that as a way to eat unless there was no other option. So you have to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. You just have to take in less energy. Otherwise, you're storing energy. It's that simple. If you're taking in more than you need, where are you putting it? You're storing it in body fat. If you are taking in less than you need, well, how is your body getting by? It's taking away from its stores in order to get by. It's meeting the need, that deficit. It's filling in that deficit from body fat. Okay? So it's super basic. Obviously, that's a simplified version of it, but you have to create a deficit somehow. Intermittent fasting, let's say skipping breakfast, not eating until noon, is a great way to do that if your lifestyle lines up for it and your body lines up with it. So for some people, they start using it thinking that they are going to just shed fat effortlessly. that might be the case. But if you already have a very stressed life, you're already sleeping 6 hours a night, you're not sleeping enough, your life is stressed, and when you do work out, you are doing like HIIT workouts and trying to kill yourself, all you did by skipping breakfast was add more stress. The body doesn't respond very well to stress. It doesn't want to lose weight forcibly. It will only lose weight if it's in a place of balance where things are calm and it can predictably pay attention and predictably reply to what's happening, what's being asked of it. If you are just stressed and going crazy and not sleeping and then go and do CrossFit 6 times a week on an empty stomach, that's just a great way to multiply your stress and make sure that you don't lose any weight. The number of CrossFitters who have come to me saying, I've been intermittent fasting and I do the 5 a.m. WOD class, but I'm not losing any weight. Why am I not losing weight? Am I metabolically broken? No, you just have a broken strategy because you don't understand your biology. So intermittent fasting can be a very powerful tool for creating a deficit easily, and it can also be a powerful tool for convenience. So you don't have to think about food all the time. Those are the two things it does great. I use it with some clients because it's an easy way for them to compress their eating window. If I have to put them on lower calories, they can, if they're going to eat from, let's say, 12 to 8 and they're on a lower set of calories in order to lose weight quickly, what it does is it just allows them to have larger meals during that time. Therefore, they're less hungry. Eventually, your body does adapt to not eating breakfast, and you just are not hungry during that time. And some people are just naturally not hungry for breakfast. That's pretty common. So it's a powerful strategy in that. But one thing it is not, and this is what I'd like to get to. One thing it is not is a secret weapon when working out. You'll see a lot of bodybuilders and so-called gurus out there will say that, training in a fasted state burns more fat. Now, the few studies we do have on this, they do show that, let's say, training on an empty stomach or doing cardio on an empty stomach burns more fat. But the amount more that it burns, and that stands to reason, right? If I'm working out and I'm asking my body to output energy, where's it getting the energy from? It's getting it from your fat cells. Okay, that stands to reason. But in the studies, the amount of improvement is so small that it's almost not statistically significant. So why am I saying you shouldn't do it? Well, because the negative sides of exercising on an empty stomach can be compounded by not eating. Meaning, if you go and you train and lift weights really hard, let's say you go do a CrossFit class on an empty stomach, you're doing a couple of things, right? You're asking your body to output a lot while you are breaking down muscle mass. Being that there is no fuel or very little fuel in the bloodstream and in the system, that breakdown can be even higher. So you can get more sore, you can create more damage because you are you're asking your body to do something in an unfed state. It is not prepared for that. Can the body manage it? Absolutely. Is it bad for you? No, I don't think so. If you prefer to work out on an empty stomach, great, but you're not getting some extra benefit out of it. You, in all likelihood, are just getting equal or less benefit than if you had a protein shake before you went. The studies show that usually what happens is if you have some protein and carbs before you work out, and the hour before you work out, your exercise will be better. So if we take that and we compound that over weeks, months, years, where your workouts are better than when they are fasted, well, the improvement that is compounded over time because you ate before you worked out, to me, is far more significant than the meager percentage that you may burn extra. So I did intermittent fasting for about 5 years. This was before I really understood the mechanisms and before I really studied it, honestly. I, I got into Martin's teachings. I really enjoyed his teachings. I got into Mark Sisson's teachings about with the primal blueprint and his intermittent fasting and things like that. I got really into it. And you know what? It served me well because at that time in my life, I was in need of something. I wasn't tracking macros. I didn't really understand how to track macros then. And, to be honest with you, I wasn't concerned about tracking macros. So I used intermittent fasting in order to drop weight, which it worked great for that. But also, I could not put on muscle mass because I wasn't eating enough. So I was wondering why. One, I looked thin, but I only looked thin. I didn't look just lean. I looked thin. I couldn't gain muscle mass. Why? Building muscle mass is a very energy intensive mechanism. It requires lots of calories. So I wasn't eating enough calories. Therefore, yes, I had abs, but I didn't have muscles. So I was just skinny. In my opinion, I did not look great. And I didn't feel good. So what happened? I started eating again. I started eating more, eating breakfast before I worked out, and I gained weight. I gained muscle mass much better. I felt better. So I did it for 5 years, intermittent fasting, and I probably took it a little too far. But I didn't get some magical surge of autophagy where my body was now healing itself more and more and more, and I felt better, and I was running on ketones. Honestly, I felt worse. I drank coffee all day to suppress my appetite and exercised like a maniac when I did exercise, and I did that on an empty stomach. And for years, I thought it was working for me. It was working towards one goal, but not towards the other. Many people don't just have one goal. They want to lose weight, but also feel better, build muscle mass. Intermittent fasting can help with some of that, but I don't recommend you just doing intermittent fasting, not paying attention to any of your other macros or your other inputs, meaning your sleep, how much activity you have through the day, your water, your stress levels in general, because everything matters. Remember, nothing is in a silo. You don't get to just change one parameter and that's the only thing it affects. If you change one parameter, it affects all the other parameters. So we have all these levers that we pull every day, and if you pull one, you have to pay attention to the others. If you pull the intermittent fasting lever, well, then you have to make sure your sleep is even better, because if you are only sleeping 5 or 6 hours a night and then not eating to go and work out, you are in a depleted state and go and create more of a depleted state. And then on top of that, if when you are eating in your window of eating and you're eating garbage because you're so hungry, you're just ramming down cakes and pies and a bunch of other trash, mainly carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates, less fats and lean proteins, then you are going to exchange muscle mass for fat mass. Because if you are not getting enough protein to meet your minimum requirements, where will your body pull it from? Remember, there is a minimum requirement for protein. It's a hard number. If you listen to the teachings of Dr. Donald Layman or Dr. Gabriel Lyons, it's not just a percentage of how much protein you need per day. Like, if I take in all these calories, I need this percentage of protein. No, it's a hard number that you need per day. And the protein leverage theory will tell you that your appetite will stay up usually until you meet at least a minimum requirement for amino acids or protein per day. So if you think about what you're doing to yourself when you pull the intermittent fasting lever but pay no attention to the others, you start skipping breakfast, you're already sleeping less, so that's a stressor. Then you wake up and go to the 5 a.m. boot camp, that's a stressor. You do that on an empty stomach, you create more stress. Then when it is time to eat, or let's say after you work out, you don't refeed yourself, you don't feed yourself, you now ram down a bunch of coffee in order to suppress your appetite more because you are hungry. So that's now you've stimulated more stress because now you're running off caffeine. And then when you do eat, you are going no holds barred because you're not paying attention to the quality of the food. Usually, this is what most people fall into. This is what I fell into. Now when you are refueling, you're refueling in an insufficient way. Therefore, you do lose weight, but you don't necessarily trade fat for muscle. The only way that I have found for people to lose fat and gain muscle is to intelligently manage stress, intake, and output. Intelligently. What I just described to you is not an intelligent mechanism. Or people who refuse to pay attention to their food, who refuse to take responsibility for their food, they say, well, I'll just intermittent fast. Okay, great. That's awesome. But if you are intermittent fasting and refusing to pay attention to these other parameters, you're in the same boat. There is no free pass here. I like what Dr. Lane Norton says. He says, if you're going to lose weight, you have to choose your restriction. The first way to lose weight is to choose your restriction. What are you going to restrict? Okay, intermittent fasting can be a tool for that. I do not recommend fasting on an empty stomach or training on an empty stomach. I don't. I just find that all you do is you get a worse workout. Now, if you feel fine doing that, great. I would say though, if you're going to train on an empty stomach, then you should be eating within the next hour or two. You shouldn't be going 3-4 hours afterwards. I know some people will be like, well, the cavemen, they didn't know if they were going to eat. And I'm going to just tell you, you're not a caveman. We live nowhere near the Paleolithic era. I truly love the paleo diet and the mechanism and framework of it because it just makes sense to some extent. But we have to understand we live in a much different time. We live with way more stress, mental and emotional stress, maybe not physical all the time, where I believe if, the cavemen were running around and having to kill mammoths and fight off saber-toothed tigers or whatever else is, the anthropologists are saying, that is a very physically stressful time and emotionally spikes stress intermittently. We live in a digital age where we are constantly bombarded, constantly unstressed, constantly being asked something of us, constantly being on. So our stress levels, our regular stress levels are just high all the time. So if you're adding to that by just being unintelligent with the way you do things or kind of brutish with the way you do things, using a hammer when a scalpel is necessary, don't be surprised when you don't get the results you want. I used to be an artist. I painted for many years. If I decided to use a hammer to paint with rather than a brush, I could not be upset that my painting looked like I used a hammer. It reflects the tool I use, okay? So when it comes to intermittent fasting, it is a tool, but it is a tool amongst a set of tools, okay? The basic premise of intermittent fasting that I think most people should take away is that it is a tool to help you find a way to restrict calories in an easy approach that doesn't feel like a diet. If you feel like you're dieting, it's usually going to be hard to adhere. At the end of the day, adherence is the key. If you find intermittent fasting helps you adhere, great. But don't ignore the other levers. You still have to pay attention to your sleep. You still have to make sure when you do eat, you get a minimum amount of protein. About 0.7 grams per pound of body weight is a minimum. If you are lifting weights, you need about 0.82 grams per pound of body weight to make sure you're covering all your bases. So for a 200-pound man, that comes out to about 165 grams of protein a day, which means if I'm eating from 12 to 8 or 9, I have to get 168 grams in there. So I'm going to have 3 meals roughly. So I'm going to divide that by 3. That's going to come out to about 55 grams per meal. I have to think through that. I can't just go and now have the eggplant lasagna, vegetarian eggplant lasagna, and think I'm just being healthy and I'm going to gain muscle mass. You're not going to gain muscle mass. You're just going to feel your you're going to shoot your blood glucose levels up, and that's all you're going to do. You're not going to build muscle mass that way. So you have to still be intelligent about your approach. And when you do intermittent fast and workout together, you are not burning extra fat. And if you are, it's minimally. What you are doing is creating more stress. So you have to manage that stress in another way. Meaning, make sure you're sleeping well, making sure that you are having some type of breathing or mindfulness practice, trying to make sure that you keep your stress levels lower. Otherwise, you do exactly what everybody else is doing when they try to cardio themselves to death and wonder why they don't lose weight on no calories. You're triggering a survival mechanism called adaptive thermogenesis, where the body slows everything down because now you are asking it to do more than you're providing for it, and you're doing it in an unintelligent way. So the body's just like, hold up, you're trying to kill us. I'm done with this. We have to stay alive. So we're holding on to all this fat. I'm actually going to burn muscle mass because it can always build more muscle mass when the calories are available, but it cannot always store fat. It stores fat when calories are abundant, but it can't know if calories are going to be abundant again. But it can build muscle mass if the calories are available. So we have to realize these are mechanisms that we cannot fight. We must walk with. We didn't create the system. We just live in it, okay? So you just work on your intermittent fast. Intermittent fasting is a great tool. I think it's great. I do it now sometimes because I'm most productive in the morning, but I don't work out in the mornings. I work out in the afternoon. So I get at least 2 meals in before I exercise in the afternoon. That way I get plenty of protein in. I'm not getting super sore. You understand? If you are going to do some form of exercise, make sure on an empty stomach. I would say if your goal is to lose fat and gain muscle, you can go for walks, ride a bike on an empty stomach, but I would not go for runs on an empty stomach. I would not lift weights on an empty stomach, and I would certainly not do CrossFit or a boot camp on an empty stomach and expect to feel better. You're not. You're going to feel like crap. So those are my thoughts. Intermittent fasting is a tool. It can be helpful. If you have questions, thoughts, rebuttals, let me know. I'm happy to answer any comments you guys put. If you disagree, please let me know. Would love to know. Talk soon.